9mm versus 45, Hatfield versus McCoy, 1911 versus Glock, Brandon Herrera versus Matt Capaldi, that's AK guy versus our budget AK guy. Age-old debate between Remington versus Mossberg, and which one am I gonna choose? Let's find out. Welcome back everybody, Clint today with Classic Firearms, out here at a nice rainy day at Take Aim Training and Range. But we're here to talk about, well, the battle of the shotguns. And just like all of the other debatable topics there are in the gun world, we've got two here in front of us that are, let's just say, at each other's tubes quite often. We've got the Mossberg 590, specifically the 590S, which we'll talk about here in just a moment and what that S is. And we've got the very old, very true, very classic Remington 870. And the ultimate question is, Mossberg 590, Remington 870, which one is better and why? And let's just go ahead and just knock this one right out. As far as price goes, the 590S is a little bit more expensive than the base Remington 870, but typically if you're looking at other different variations of the Remington 870, they are usually a little bit more expensive than any of the Mossberg 590s. Take that for what you will. But in today's comparison, the 590S is a little bit more expensive. How about ergonomics? The guns are obviously very, very similar. They're both dual action bar, pump action 12 gauge shotguns. However, well, where the safety is and where your action release are located in two very different spots. On the Remington 870, we have our typical cross-bolt safety that you see right here. Right now the safety is off, red showing dead. You'll notice your action release is actually sitting right here. That allows you to pump it if it hasn't been charged and you need to go ahead and rack a round into the chamber. On the Mossberg 590, you'll notice that we have our safety right back here. Some people prefer this quite a bit. It's a little bit easier to manipulate than the cross-bolt, and you don't have to change the positioning of your trigger finger. The action release on this guy is actually on the left-hand side of the gun and at the rear of the trigger guard. Another thing that a lot of people like quite a bit. And so the Mossberg 590 might have better ergonomics than the Remington 870, but it really just depends on you. I grew up with the Remington 870, so I know these controls better in my mind, right? Okay, cool. How about serviceability? Because at the end of the day, the Mossberg 590 actually kind of beats out the Remington 870 in that front. It's easier to maintain because it's easier to take down, and the end user serviceability is a little bit easier than this guy. Since the Remington 870 has been around for so long, as has like the Mossberg 500 series, but the Remington 870 has a lot of aftermarket support. But there are some things, if you wanted to put on a different magazine tube, things like that, you're gonna have to have a pretty specific skill set as where the magazine tube is actually soldered to where the receiver is. By the way, the receivers on these, this has a steel receiver, this has an aluminum receiver, and you can barely tell the difference between the two just holding them. So because this is aluminum, you will notice that this is slightly lighter. The steel framed receiver, everybody will think, well, yeah, that'll probably last longer than the aluminum. That tends to be true, but where are the failure points going to be? The receiver itself actually isn't taking too much abuse at the end of the day, other than maybe some cosmetic abuse from you or me, but it is actually where the action bars meet up. Since the action bars that both of these shotguns utilize, that is the rails that you see right here that the pump actually rides on, they are both steel. So the steel over time can actually start to wear a little bit around that aluminum receiver. All right, well, I should say the aluminum should wear around the steel action bars, and you're not going to have that much of a problem with the Remington 870. Okay, easy enough. Now you also notice the 590S, specifically the S, is a pretty interesting design because, well, it also takes those really short shot shells, like those 1 3/4 shells, I think they are. I actually think it's, you know, like says it on here, 12 gauge, 590, chambered for 2 3/4 and 3-inch shells. 590S chambered for 1 3/4, 2 3/4, and 3-inch. So that's pretty interesting there. You guys know those little short shells that we're talking about. Aguila makes them. They're pretty cool rounds, especially if you're looking for something that's still going to punch the 12 gauge hit, I guess you could say, or pack the 12 gauge punch is what I'm trying to say, but you don't want as much recoil. That is something that you can take into consideration. The 870, there are adapters out there, but they do have some reliability issues in that sense. And no, those 1 3/4 shells aren't going to run in any of the semi-auto shotguns that I know of. There's just not enough oomph behind them to actually cycle that action. But since these are pump action and you are the manual transmission operating the gun, it's up to you about pumping the gun. So cool, chambering the next round, extracting the previous round, all that type of stuff, right? So fun. Okay, so I think we pretty much hit on the basics there. Now it really kind of comes down to what other features do these guns have to offer? Now granted, that was a perfect raindrop hit. Now granted, the 590S isn't exactly a fair matchup to the base Remington 870 that you see here, because the 590S also has an optics cut right back here for you to throw on a red dot or anything like that, which again is just kind of a cool feature. But you will notice something that Mossberg has always done over Remington is that brass bead sight. That is actually something that I've always favored over the Mossberg, or I should say favored over the Remington, because that really does pick up a lot more natural to the naked eye than the standard black bead sight that you have on the 870. As far as rear sights go, nope. So there you have it, all right? But how about how these guns shoot and fill? And let's talk about capacity once we get them loaded up. But at the end of it all, what I'm expecting is not noticing much of a difference when it comes to shooting them. But it will be kind of cool at distance to see a little bit of what our shot pattern looks like on our cardboard target behind us. So that would be pretty neat. And of course, well, which one can I shoot the fastest? Because that's definitely something we're going to be taking a look at today. So without further ado, let's go ahead, load these guys up and send some rounds down range. And will I be able to notice any more felt recoil out of the Mossberg because of that lighter aluminum receiver? Let's find out. So first up, the Remington 870. We're going to be running some Panzer high velocity, 1,350 feet per second, 2 3/4 9-ball double-up buck, just because why not? So first of all, we got 1 round, 2, and also to load the Remington, as you can tell, pretty easy. That is number 4, 5, that might be our max right there. 6, impressive, okay. And 6 is where we're at, +1. But all I want to do is take 3 shots really quick, nice center mass shots to get a good shot pattern and get that read. We're at 20 yards away right now, so let's go ahead and just get 3 shots on target on that paper. All right, great. Let's go check that shot pattern. So favoring the left side of the target, that could be me, but you'll notice we've got good center mass impact and then right into the wood here. Hopefully this stays standing. These 3 right in a row, which I think is pretty funny. But yeah, as you can tell, you got a pretty good size spread at 20 yards. Let's go ahead and grab the Mossberg and see how that one feels. Now the Mossberg 590S. Let's go ahead and here, 2 3/4 shells again. The same, loads nice and easy. That's 1, 2. And then we got 3. Actually, I think it probably loads easier than the Remington, which honestly, the Remington isn't bad at all. That's 4, 5. Can we get one more in there? 6. Perfect. So they both have 6-round capacity. Yes. Awesome. All right. So same thing. Again, actuating the action right back here with the action release. Safety is on. Again, 3 well-placed shots. We've got the Mossberg target just to the left of the Remington target, and let's see what kind of placement we get here. All right, great, safety on. Let's go check it out. So from here, it looks like it had a little bit tighter group center mass where I was aiming, which is nice, and it favored a little bit more the right side of the target. So that could be shooter error, yes, but at the end of it all, I do believe that these are about the same. If you're kind of holding low left, or I should say you're kind of holding high right, these might be a little bit more center mass, and in this one, high left, and I think we'd be a little bit better off too, or maybe just a tad bit over left. I don't even think I'd hold high left. But as you can see, our spread is pretty similar. I got one way on up here, and then these ones are our lowest hits. Highest hit on the Remington, lowest hit on the Remington. It's pretty similar at the end of the day. So let's go ahead and just run these out really quick as fast as we can. And something to keep in mind with shotguns is if you plan on using one as a defensive tool or something like that, just remember ABR. Always be reloading because you have limited round capacity when it comes to these shotguns. So something like that is something you'd want to take into consideration. That should be the full tube there. Let's just double check because that was only perfect. So I've got one in the chamber. Let's just run this really fast here and let's see what type of pattern we get after just trying to do a quick mag dump. All right, about 10 yards away, we're gonna rig this shot timer since Kaya decided to take that with him and didn't leave it at the range with us. Thanks, Kaya. John, you ready? All right, he's gonna measure the first shot to the last click of that hammer falling. So let's just see how fast I can go ahead and unload this gun with one in the chamber. Let's do it. Whew, shotguns are fun. There we go, nice and clear. About how fast was that?
3.14.
3.14, all right, I'll take it. Now let's go ahead and load up the Remington and see if we get something similar. All right, same drill, just as fast as we can go with the Remington, aiming on that right target. John, you ready? All right, let's do this. Oh God, I love recoil. All right. Ooh, all right, so I don't know what that was, but I was getting quite a few hiccups there on the Remington, and I don't know if it's just because I was trying to run this so fast, I was twisting the action bars a little bit, but that's what it felt like to me. How fast was that?
4.15.
Yeah, so I was definitely quicker with the Mossberg. It was just a smoother action for me in comparison. So, will my favorite be replaced today? Let's go take a look at the targets. So the first one, coming in at just over 3 seconds with the Mossberg 7 rounds on target here. You'll notice these bigger hits, that's gonna be pretty much from the wad. Not pretty much, that's exactly what it is. There's a wad that forces all those projectiles down range, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. You'll notice again, I favored pretty heavily the left side of the target, so I'm thinking that's probably me and where I'm holding. And also, this is just a speed drill for fun. We are about 10 yards distance. The Remington, here we are, same, pretty similar shot pattern, but I don't see as tight of a group like I do right here on the Mossberg. The Remington, we're noticing I got a headshot up here, so I was probably bouncing all over the place. But remember too, I was having that little bit of an issue with the actual functioning of the pump. So not too sure what that's about, but we're gonna keep running it and see how I feel with it. And we're gonna try it with slugs now. We've got a total of what, 8 slugs?
Yep.
So 4 through each, and let's see how slugs feel through the Mossberg and the Remington. All right, so let's go ahead and run some, well, the slugs that we're running here today are 3-gun slugs, so these would be actually not as much punch to them. These are the BMP slugs. They say 1,200 feet per second, 1-ounce slugs. All right, great. So let's go ahead and let's just do 2 center mass, 2 to the head, and see what we get here. We are at 20 yards again, so let's have some fun with it here. All right, the 3-gun slugs from BMP are like cheating. That's actually a lot less recoil than the buckshot. We don't have any full power slugs, right?
Here's the only one.
All right, so I guess we'll save that for another day when we do maybe a comparison. I wouldn't mind seeing a torture test between the two. Just let me know if you guys would down in the comments. Let's go a little bit higher to the head. Well, let's get the Remington now and see what kind of shot placement we get there. All right, Remington, you're up next now with the, well, the low pressure slugs, I guess you can call them. All right, 2 to the chest here. 2 to the head. Let's go see how they look. So with the Mossberg, I noticed shooting a little high. Those are my 2 center mass shots, and then I guess the other one went right over the target, and then my first or second round decided to graze them. My Remington here, we did get 2 in the chest, great, and then 1 right here at the neck, and then 1, well, pretty much right where I want it to be. So I was a little bit more accurate with the Remington, which is funny because I said I like how this sight picks up a little bit more. But notice too, I'm still think I'm favoring, I'd say I'm pretty right on here, still favoring the left side of the target slightly, and with that one being shot to the right, I'm just going to consider that one a flyer. So at the end of it all, they both feel great to shoot. They do. As far as accuracy goes, out of 20 yards, again with those 3-gun slugs, yeah, I think I did a little bit better with the Remington, but again, this isn't exactly a scientific test of the two, really testing how accurate these guys are going to perform. Now, with everything else going on, I still think I'm going to lend my hand towards the Mossberg a bit, because now I know aim a little bit lower, and mainly because of, I don't know, maybe it's the pump design. Maybe I just got better grip with Mossberg's pump design than I did Remington's, and my hand just didn't slide off of the Mossberg as much. But I really did feel like it was kind of hiccupy, I guess you could call it, whenever I was trying to actuate this guy pretty quickly, and I felt like maybe I was just binding the action bar some and not pulling straight back, which again, under stress, pressure, tension, things like that, you might not be exactly perfect whenever you're actuating the pump on your shotgun. So something else to take into consideration. Make sure you're giving it that full stroke. Yes, I'll see you down in the comment section with that comment. But full stroke, you don't want to short stroke your shotgun because then you won't fully eject or fully pick up your next round. So keep that in mind. Other than that though, I think they're both great guns. But for this video, I think the Mossberg 590S is gonna ultimately win it out for me. Let me know what you guys think, which is kind of a surprise because I've always been more of a Remington fanboy. I like the controls and the ergonomics better, even though I think technically this one might be more ergonomic. It's just what I grew up with, what I know. So brand loyalty, question mark? Here we are. But let me know down in the comment section, are you team Remington or team Mossberg? And if you'd like to see a more elaborate test between the two shotguns, let me know down in the comment section. If you'd like to see a little bit more abuse by these two, let me know. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a unanimous yes. And I think it's safe enough to leave it off there. We'll leave it off there, guys. As always, we appreciate your business. God bless. We'll see you down in the comment section all about Remington versus Mossberg, and see you at Classic Firearms.